there, it's Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to do a little bit of kind of masking but tone on tone kind of card making using up some of my craft cardstock and card bases. Now I am going to be using these ones here today. This is the Nina Solar White Desert Storm cardstock. So basically just a craft cardstock, and I have a stash of it and I need to use it up. So I am going to be doing a couple of craft cards, and I am going to be using a tool set for these stamps. Then I am also going to use the Gina K masking paper. You guys will know that this one is one of my absolute favorites because it holds up really well. And one thing when I go to make masks for things, I want to be able to reuse them and not just have it a one-time use thing. So this masking paper is the best for that as well that I have found. I did use my anti-static powder bag there because I'm going to be embossing this. I am picking out several of the tools, sort of a hammer, some pliers, a few little nuts and bolts, and maybe some screws. I just picked out some things that I thought would work well for the cards that I'm going to be making today. Now I am actually going to be making two of these, so you'll kind of see two in screen at times, and then but I'm just going to show you the process going through one because it is almost identical for both cards. So at the moment I am working with a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card front. Now I will cut this down a little bit, and people ask why I don't cut them down to begin with, and that's because I often like to kind of pick the best parts and pick the bits that I want to cut off later on, because sometimes it can be as simple as inking up and you kind of get a harsh edge somewhere, or sometimes I get a little spill that I don't like somewhere, or I get like a drop of ink that I want to cut off the side or something like that. So if it's in a place I can cut it off, that means at least I have the choice, and it doesn't bother me if I do it now or if I do it later. So I have stamped these out in some VersaFine Onyx black ink, which is a really nice pigment ink. It stamps crisp and clear, and then I'm going to put some super fine clear embossing powder over top. Now I guess this step is not really necessary, however I do it for a couple of reasons. I do really like the shine, it kind of feels like an extra finishing touch to the card, but I also find that this means there is no way that I can smear the ink or smudge it if it is a touch wet. Now this is where I'm going to do the same thing here on this is the masking paper, so I'm just stamping out all of the things that I need, and I need 2 of some of the screws and things, but the hammer and the pliers I just need 1, as well as the ruler. But I'm actually going to heat emboss these as well. Now again, I already have everything out, so it literally takes me 10 seconds extra. I find that this helps the longevity of the masks, it helps them stay a bit longer, and again, I can't smudge the ink from the masking paper either. Too many times I have kind of put them on my project, gone to ink blender over them, and realized that I'm smudging the black ink because it doesn't heat set very well on top of this masking paper. So that eliminates that problem for me, and it gives them a longer life. And especially when I'm going to the trouble of going to fussy cut these, I am all for that. Now when I'm fussy cutting, speaking of, I'm making sure to cut either right on the black line or even a little bit inside of it, because when you are cutting a mask and you are going to be inking around it, I don't want there to be a halo of empty space around there, so I'm making sure that the ink is going to come right up to the edges. These are all fairly easy shapes to fussy cut, so this was a pretty quick process for me, and as I said, I know that I'm going to reuse all of these masks and keep them all in the back of the packaging for the stamp, so that suits me just fine. Another way that you could do it is by using just an embossing pen. You could go over where the detail of the stamps where it didn't stamp ink, and then you could put more clear embossing powder over top, and that would just be like an ink resist. But for me, I was just happy to create these masks, so either. As I said, I was going for a little bit of a kind of tone on tone look for this card, and so I'm going to kind of use some browns on top of the craft cardstock, and sometimes not introducing a whole lot of new colors can be really fun. So I have got my craft piece of cardstock here, and I'm going to peel off the back of all of these masks, and then I'm just going to make sure that I keep all of the backing pieces there. So as I said, I'm just going to put them directly back on after I'm finished with them, and I'm just going to lay these down as carefully as I can because I don't want, as I said, any of those halos. So I think the stamp set might have been discontinued, but I will link anything down below that I can find, any of the products that I have used in today's video. But obviously you are welcome to use any of your stash. This does not have to be a tall themed card. Both of these cards are going to be going to a couple of builders to thank them for a job that they are doing. So this just seemed an appropriate theme, but as I said, you could use anything at all, have any theme going for your card, and just use a tone on tone. You could start off with a light blue piece of cardstock and then add some darker blue inks over top as well. So you could use any color. Now these are my ink blending brushes. I will link them down below in case you are interested, but that is what I'm going to be using. I've been using them a little bit recently, and although I still really like the domed foam blenders, I do find that these brushes are a good way to get a really soft gradual blend. So you can see I actually tap off a whole lot of the ink down below first of all, and I have obviously sped this up as well. This is sped up about 3 or 4 times I think, and I am just going over this over and over again until I get the exact right amount of kind of blending, and I just want it to kind of fade out there so that this right hand side and the very left hand side doesn't have ink at all. Then I have this Woodgrain stamp, which I'm just going to use the exact same vintage photo ink. And now this stamp, I think it's only a 5x5 one, obviously, and so it's going to be a bit short. That doesn't matter because, as I said, I'm going to end up cutting this down, so it doesn't bother me at all. What also doesn't bother me with wood grain is having to kind of continue on the pattern. So although you can see there's a really harsh line down the bottom there, when you see the finished card at the very end, you won't even notice that actually the stamp didn't go all the way, I promise. So I'm adding on a little bit extra to the top and bottom, and don't even worry about how harsh that line looks at the moment. Now at this point I have still got the masks on there, I haven't taken them off. And I'm going to use some, this happens to be the Dylusions white paint. However, using some white gesso or any white acrylic paint is going to work just fine. And I'm just going to create a little few splashes. Obviously, if this is not your thing, you don't have to add these at all. In general, the finer the paintbrush or the smaller the paintbrush you use, then the smaller the splashes or the finer the splashes will be. So I tend to go with a kind of small brush generally, but I am flicking quite hard to get quite a lot of splashes on top of this. And again, it's just going to give some nice contrast to all of that brown. Now I'm going to peel off these masks, and this is my favorite part. I do really enjoy this part, kind of feels like a reveal. So I will pull off all the masks gently because I know that I'm going to be keeping them, and in fact I use them for the second card as well. So actually in the background I was popping these straight onto another card. I am going to use some fine tweezers because at this stage the white splashes were definitely not dry, and I was trying to reduce the risk of me kind of smearing those or smudging them whilst the ink was wet. So I'm just going to kind of carefully take these all off, and then before I put them back onto my other card I will make sure that I wipe off any of that white paint that landed on top of these masks. And I really do like how this is a very simple card. Don't get me wrong, there is nothing complicated about the cards that I do generally. I usually don't have a whole lot of time for card making at one time kind of thing. I usually have short amounts of time. So the cards I do tend not to be really long processes. Now there are lots of kind of ways that you can take this card from here, but as I said, this one is going to be finished up relatively simple, but here are the 2 versions that I made of this one. You can see they're pretty much just a mirror image of each other. Now I have the Curly Greetings stamp set. This is from the Woodware Craft Collection, and I have this thank you here, although I want it to be stacked on top of each other. And I'm not gonna lie, at this point in the day, I knew I didn't have too much time left, so I am going to pop these on an acrylic block and stamp onto my almost complete card. So this was a bit risky. If I had a bit more time, perhaps I would have gotten out a stamping platform, because I don't want to ruin the card at this point, but it all worked out just fine, and acrylic blocks work brilliantly. So they're still a really good tool to have in our craft room, and nice and speedy. So I'm just using the exact same VersaFine Onyx black ink, and I knew that these should stamp well because the stamps are good quality from Woodware, and also I'm not stamping on top of anything that is bumpy or there's any layers, so I knew that it should stamp pretty good, and I just needed this quick little thank you that worked perfectly alongside it there. I gave it a good push down and a chance to transfer some of that ink, and it worked out fine. So here is where I'm going to cut them down, and I'm just kind of thinking about the bits that I want to cut away. As I said, these are going to go onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card base. So I knew that I needed to cut these down to be about 4 by 5 1/4 inches. And that gave me just a really nice border that didn't have any kind of busy markings and colorings and designs on it. I really like that nice clear border. I find it makes the card front panel stand out all the more when I do have that border. So I'm going to trim these down, and then, as I said, there are so many things that you could do from here. If you wanted to, you could also add some glossy accents on top of the tools, and that would give them a little bit of dimension and dry nice and glossy and clear. And if you also did that first and then let it dry, you wouldn't have to create masks, because it would create a resist. But I didn't end up doing that, obviously. I just went for the masks. But I have used a bit of foam tape on the back here just to give a little bit of dimension. And then when I know I have to kind of place a panel nicely and I don't want to risk it, I end up using some liquid glue on the back of my foam tape, which I know seems counterintuitive because it already has adhesive on the back of the foam tape, but this way it just lets me slide the card around and get them all nice, perfectly lined up around all of the edges without me sort of needing a second chance or needing to rip up the tape if I don't get it perfectly down the first time. So it's basically a safety measure, and sometimes I just need that in my card making. So I'm just adding liquid glue. Inside this glue bottle is the Ranger Multi-Medium in the matte finish. That's the glue that I use inside of these glue bottles. But I'm going to pop these down, and that is pretty much my cards finished for today. So I hope you enjoyed these really simple tone on tone cards. This is a good one for the boys. Thank you so much for joining me today, and all of the lovely comments down in the comment section. I really enjoy reading those, and I enjoy all of the support that you guys gave when my daughter popped her gorgeous little voice in the other day. Thank you so much. She enjoyed hearing all of your lovely comments, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. I will have everything linked down in the description box below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, bye!